you're gonna get free this time. Falling into a blue sky mind. Came to me in that song, my friend.
Hello, I have missed you all. It's been a hot minute. Welcome back to You Mean the Elephant. This is Deb Air, your host. This podcast calls me to task on a few things. Number one, I feel like whatever subject we're going to talk about, I am going through some active process because it's in the field. When I talk about field, I'm talking about the field of influence that exists around us and we are responding to. And I am privileged to work with people very intimately each week. And the environment in which I do that in is creating a very focused field. It's like a magnifying glass. So the first thing that happens is it's like I notice something and I can hear it in conversations, even though people might be dealing with different things. There is that golden thread. And I've talked about that a lot on here. And then for whatever reason, part of my dharmic path is that whatever is up in the field, I am part of the field. You are part of the field. So then my process starts to happen in whatever my personal relationship, my individual relationship is to that theme that's coming up to speak about. So that's certainly what's been happening for me in regard to today's episode, which is just one word, and that word is change, question mark, because we're always asking a question. That's the way in to the space and that space in between, that ma being the Japanese word for space. If you think of Japanese architecture, for instance, there's a lot less furniture. And really, within Japanese architecture, what their philosophy or outcome desire is that the structures within the room, the furniture within the room is actually there to amplify the space. And that's what I try to do, is to try to amplify the space between the words, to amplify the space to give way to expanded purview of what we may be talking about that may hit you in a certain way, in a unique way, that may support you in a novel way, that may allow you to spark the seed of growth within you and in your relationships. We do that through asking a question, because when we ask a question, the thing that it requires is curiousness. And I am a true believer that to be curious is a catalyst into the space, into the ma, into the wisdom between the trapeze swings. So change is something we can all relate to. One of the things that I feel like has slipped out of my lips a million times is we all have the same ticket to ride. That's the one thing we know, is that ultimately, whatever your belief systems are, the life that exists in this body is ultimately temporary. In that vein, one of probably the most notable quotes on change is the one constant in life is change. And I don't think any of us, you included, have gone unscathed with having some experience of resistance, perhaps, or fear around change, on things changing. And that change can be a zillion things. And just to define it, even though it sounds ridiculous to do that, it's anything that is not staying what feels like the same. So that can be something as extreme as death. We lose a loved one. It can be a change of vocation, of living arrangements, of relationships, of aging. There's so many different ways in which change enters through our life. And what's most important, as always, really, is how are we relating to that? Like, so how are we relating to change? Well, who does Deb become when change comes into her sphere, into the field of influence? We all have had an experience, and sometimes it's so subtle, meaning like, I don't even know that I'm nervous to change because I have all my habits and I do all my things that kind of keep a regularity about me and like the tempo of my life. where I don't even recognize that some of the things that I'm doing or focusing on are because I'm resistant to change. So I'm trying to hold on to some aspect of what I perceive as stability or safety that is going to prevent this change. It's that side eye that Crystal and I talked about on our first episodes. It's like, I know it exists, but I'm not going to look at it. Going back to the one constant in life is change. I'm a big supporter of you might as well engage with your relationship with change because change is coming whether you want it to or not. We might as well be more engaged with change and what that means for us and allow it to catalyze or open up a door to gain greater awareness about ourselves and what that means for us in any given moment. Jack Welch says, change before you have to. And that's really what I'm getting to. Be in relationship with change. How do you do change? How, in general, are you like, no, I like change, I like my consistency? Or are you like the varietal person that is really has a hard time with structure, really has a hard time settling in, and you just want constant adventure? You're craving change. Regardless of what our center of gravity is and life habits of how we live, you might be that one that's like slow and steady wins the race. I like my consistency. Or you may be that one that gets bored really freaking fast and you're like, oh my God, I'm craving some change. I'm craving adventure. By nature of being human, we all know what either sides of those feel like. The need to feel something different, the need for change, the need to want to sink deeper into a relationship, the desire to seek your dreams and be able to manifest what you desire in life. There's also that part that we get butterflies. Sometimes even the most invigorating changes require us to let go of some aspect of version of ourself in order to make that change. Therefore, there is a part of grief that comes in that, or at least honoring of what has been. I'm thinking of my dad right now in this phrase, and I'm sure most of you know it. It's don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. And I remember him saying this, and I don't know if this is true or not, but that he said back in the day, you would use the same water for a family for bathing, and it would be like oldest to youngest. And so by the time the baby was in the bath water is dirty and they're going to throw out the water. So they're like, don't throw the baby out with the bath water. What does that represent symbolically? When we can change by honoring both things in regard to what has been and what is evolving, it allows for a more sustainable way of changing, to transcend. So to make the change and include. So don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, for instance. How can we be in relationship with change and know that something is wanting to emerge, like the seasons? I was running in the woods the other day and I was looking at all the leaves, and I felt this experience of change in regard to the beauty of this cycle that was happening, where these leaves like had their life and then they had a new purpose. They had an evolving purpose. Those leaves were still important because now they're becoming food for Mother Earth. And I could just see in that moment, when like your purview opens up and you feel like you can see something. I don't know, that's me anyways. You can see something so far greater in a moment versus I'm just on this trail running along. It's like suddenly I could see Mother Earth and I could see this whole orchestra of life cycle happening. And that is what I call transcend and include. When we cannot shift our perception of something and we're holding on with strong resistance, it's really hard to grow. And it takes a lot of energy to hang on and try to prevent something from growing. I think that one of our epidemics in our culture is that we are so hanging on to preventing death that sometimes we're not living. Sometimes we're not taking those risks. We're not dipping our toes into the puddles and getting our feet wet and forgetting that they will dry. So if you're a go-getter and you are an optimizer and you are a goal setter and achiever, then you're going to be like, yeah, like let's fucking go. Change is my middle name. Regardless of where you may relate to more, meaning that you really like variety and change all the time, or you like to have your ducks in a row and it's really hard for you to do anything. Like I have certain clients that come in and they always want the same table. And if that table isn't there, I do brag on them though, because as people get care, they become so much more available for change and more comfortable. So let's say going to a different table than the one that they're usually comfortable with. But we have, that's the thing. This is just even to go back to what people like. If the table's available, they'll probably take it, the one they like. But they're flexible enough for change to go, oh, okay, that's not available. I'm going to go on that one. So, regardless of what end of the spectrum you are, the constant is that change happens. So, how can we be in relationship with change in a way where we can kind of put in the center this whole concept of transcend and include? That if we know just by being born into this body that we are going to constantly transcend to some degree, that change is constant, and that we want to embody and appreciate what has been, that there's wisdom of what has been. And if you are someone who hates change or resists change, that there may be some novelty and ways that you can dip your toes in a little differently in developing a more easeful relationship with change. And if you are somebody that has a hard time settling and you feel really bored or you feel lost if something isn't moving or changing in your world, that you may be able to come in a little bit more and find some more sovereignty and ease and ownership of the wisdom of being consistent with something, being able to hunker down, being able to commit in a different way. This has been up for me on several levels. Honestly, I think that when we dip into it a little bit deeper, I think in the heart of it is really the challenge or conflict of both. Meaning, I think that the parts that we are afraid to change can be masked by our need to always change. I'm going to say that again because I'm just processing this with you, that sometimes our fear of change is hidden under our habits of needing a lot of change. And that sometimes where we need to change is masked under being reliable and consistent. That's the like brain twisting. It makes us frustrated and confused and sometimes can put us into the freeze or we're more on our devices because we want a feeling of dopamine of change. We want that feeling, but because we're avoiding a deeper understanding of ourselves that may be required for that change to be more conscious, that we are going to give ourselves the experience of change more superficially and vice versa. I can get more into focusing on organization. Okay, this is where I need my keys. They're all great things, by the way. I need my superficial things really organized. And I'm going to focus on all these tasks. But really, what I'm doing is I'm avoiding where I need to really put my focus. And I can't remember what is it called? Productive procrastination. That's what that is. We're like, okay, we're going to organize these things. I'm going to clean my room. I'm going to do these. Oh, let me just organize my closet. Again, by themselves, beautiful things. But if you notice that you're doing that as a way of the potential avoidance of some deeper change that needs to happen, you're going to end up at the end of the day feeling out of balance, still feeling stress, having a hard time sleeping, having anxiousness, having arguments in your relationship. However it may show out, it will still show out because it's beckoning you. And everyone knows the concept of if you're not listening, that things get louder, right? And living in such a urgent society, living in a way in which we are quite conditioned not to trust our body and our instincts and or have strategies that allow us to be emotionally intelligent and relatable. Most people that I ask, how good are you with emotions? They're like, I've teased a lot of people over the years that emotion is considered a four-letter word. It's like, I don't go there. And even those of you that emote a lot of times, if you're emoting about the same thing, that still is a limitation of what you're allowing yourself to truly feel. We're comfortable with the things that we're used to feeling. Change requires a little bit of discomfort. It requires a pause that says, wait, like what has been, what I know to be true thus far is not the whole message. It's not all that I need to expand and grow as a human being, as a soul. Some of the challenges that can come up is that if we are really identified with things, we are in a world right now that it's so hyper identified with a side in politics, identified with whether you are a vegetarian or you are paleo or you're a carnivore. We become super identified, which again, within themselves, the things I'm talking about are great. But if we can't look at a broader spectrum, if we can't be willing to see the truth in the opposite thing, meaning if I don't eat meat, means that I have to be opposed to people eating meat. Like if they're mutually exclusive, that's a challenge because I'm creating identity that closes the view, closes the availability of learning, closes the information that I'm willing to take in based on something that I either believe in or do. And I know I've mentioned this on here before. I had a spiritual teacher that said, see God in the things that you don't believe in. See God in some of the things that you're against. And this was many years ago. In this day and age, this is even more important. I've seen some pretty disturbing things, like even after the election, been said by people I love. I'll just say this for the lack of better verbiage on both sides. And suddenly I could feel the contraction where we have gotten so conditioned to be identified with one thing. And that if I'm identified this, that means automatically that I'm against this. And this goes back to the transcend and include. Is it possible to be able to see the wisdom of things that are hard to see, of things that have been? And can you also see things that are different than yourself, different than maybe what you know to be true thus far? Like, are you even willing? And I think what happens in our identity, if we are also not connected to our sensations, not familiar with what we experience and how we feel life and what allows us to move towards things and away from things and what allows us to be in relationship with each other, we become even more dependent on what identity we hold. And the trickery is that our identities are usually so influenced by external things. We live in a virtual world, we're getting all this information, but the algorithms, the way that they work, they're just going to give you the information that confirm all the things you're already thinking. What I might get in my news feed, for instance, even if I have the same friends or followers, may be very different than what you get on your news feed. And that is because the way that that system works is to market the things that you already have shown that you are in resonance with. So what that algorithm is going to do is continue to show you those things so that they just reinforce that. Things are so much more nuanced than we think. So if you think that you're someone who loves change or hates change, know that there is an absolute possibility and opportunity for you to delve into a little bit more of the nuance of change. There's always room to become more neurologically aware, sensory beings that we are, to become more connected to the truth of what experiences we have inside, to know what we're actually feeling, to be able to explore that, to be able to be intimate with people and have the courage and vulnerability and sacred containers that allow us to deepen into our awareness and even know what it feels like to share something that is hard to share. These are really requirements, but because they're very fragmented in our world, we end up identifying more strongly with just the identity of who we are. What we're afraid of when we are fearing change is something that we know, some part of us knows that we've been ignoring. Like, you know, that to be some part of you knows, like, fuck, I know there's something in there and I'm scared to death because it's been sequestered so much that it's become some scary thing. The further we are from ourselves, the further we are from wanting to be in presence and be able to connect with the wisdom that already exists. We were not built broken. We have all of the wisdom. The key is dancing in the nuance and knowing that nothing is truly completely black and white. And I'm not saying that we cannot be sure and certain. We need certainty in moments, but we also need to be able to transcend. We need the certainty of including what we know to be certain, and also knowing that within certainty of knowing is there's more information, there's more for us to discover about life, about ourselves, and about our relationships. And I think that's what being in relationship with change differently or more intimately can offer you, is knowing that it is not your enemy. It requires us to look at things within ourselves that we like, that we don't like, that we're afraid of, that we're excited for, that we're confused over, that we're certain of. So it requires an inner dialogue. It requires an inner reflection because we are so prompted to not trust that inner reflection and to actually fear that. I believe that is why many of us fear change. And I would venture to guess that, like Gandhi's quote, be the change you want to see in the world. Most of you that listen to this, at least in part, have that philosophy in your heart and may even have self judgment because you're like, I believe that, but I've been hurt. I've had old trauma. I can't do these things. And sometimes the thing that we're trying to hold on to is the very thing we need to change. And the thing that we keep changing is the very thing we need to settle into more, which goes back to my original, like, what? It feels confusing. And I'm like, okay, confusion is required sometimes to scramble us enough to help us untether a little bit to the things that we're too attached to that prevent us from seeing something more that could touch us in ways that we could never, ever imagine. I've been noticing this with myself. I can see it even on a regular day. My son and his girlfriend got a little box in their house where they throw their phones. That is just like a physical reminder to like get off their devices. And most of you probably know this, that on your devices, you can look at how many hours of screen time have you had. I feel like a lot of us are seeking change in that way. This is to go back to sometimes we do a lot of change or dopamine hits. So we might go to our screen and we may just fill up ourselves with little bits of change, little bits of information that help us get through the sloggier times of going, oh my God, I don't want to think about who I am, why I'm here, what I'm made of. What is life about? Like, fuck that. I just want to go on Instagram and just like get some hits and look at what other people are doing in their life. And then I'm going to go over here and feel even worse about myself because I am certainly not doing any of those things that all these cool people are doing that I'm looking at. It can keep us in this closed loop. Like life is moving too fast. I'm engaged with so many things and I'm still stuck. And that's what I have been looking at is where do I engage with quick, fast hits of change And what is that preventing me from when it comes to things that I really want to engage with, things that I feel meaningful, when I'm in my creative mode and ways that I want to create things for people? Am I keeping busy with different forms of change so that by the time I go to the thing that's most meaningful, I don't have enough energy for that? I don't have enough chutzpah for it because I've already gotten my hit, I've gotten my fill. For me, what I'm looking at in regard to change is how can I flirt with it a little bit? How can I look at the things that I don't think need change or the things that I'm procrastinating on? So maybe it's really obvious I need to change. But the thing we need to be mindful of that is that we already have so many inner judgments. So if you're a procrastinator, if you have a hard time focusing and take an inventory of what needs to change, we tend to overdo it, meaning, okay, I suck. I haven't been doing this. So now I need to do this in order to feel worthy. And what do? I'm going to feel the too muchness of that. So I'm going to get on my phone or I'm going to distract myself. I'm going to clean out my closet, even though I just cleaned it out last week. I haven't cleaned out my closet. I really need to, by the way. But this is the trickery. So small little bits. Where do you feel energy? I've gotten to the point because I'm connecting, like always connect with your sensations. Know that no matter, and I say this very delicately, I know that for some of us, even getting our hands on our body can feel scary because of past trauma. What I'm saying is the more that you can even become somewhat connected somewhere in your body where you can begin to build more safety, and or you can find places out in the field around you. I was just doing this exercise with someone the other day where I asked him to imagine a time where he felt most joyful, most space. I had him move his arm around and I said, like, imagine if you could feel it either in your body or even out and around your body. And he was able to reach. And as soon as he felt like put his hands literally into this one location, he immediately chuckled. He goes, oh, and he felt like this momentary experience of joy. And then I asked him to think about a time where he just feels so much love and so much gratitude. And he was like, oh. These are ways that you can begin to create a bigger palette of connection with yourself that allows you to connect with what's most true for you before you get lost in procrastinating or beating yourself up or putting too much on your to-do list that you will never feel successful, that keeps you in the loop. That's the thing, is that often we can be so overwhelmed with all the things that we're doing that we're like, I can't handle something else to change. I just want to feel stable. And what I'm suggesting is that the more you can start to find places in you that feel safe, that feel connected, that allow you to feel, the more that stabilizes and centers you before you go off and take the action. Like, it allows you to be in more right relationship with what needs to change, if anything needs to change in that moment, because staying busy is a form of change. And I had this conversation with Crystal on here a long time ago. It's like when you're in the moment of feeling like I have no space, I have no time, then it's going to feel like you don't have time to get your hands on your body. And you do. And sometimes we just need to take one tiny step to create a little bit of a novelty in what we're not changing. So, just in our routine. So, think about a routine. So, even if you're busy, do something different in that routine. That's a type of novelty, and novelty is a type of change. And some of the things that you're like chronically doing where you're like, oh my God, I'm doing this thing again. Like, get a box for your phone if it's your phone. If you're chronically staying up late, have some warm tea, start a ritual that goes, okay, I'm going to shut off my phone at 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock. I am going to read 15 minutes, just little things that change a little bit of the space enough that then creates a different experience that allows you to deepen into your connection of where the truer change is calling you, where the truer experience of your own evolution wants you to go. All the answers are already here. And it can feel scary and it can feel vulnerable. And that's why we need to share these things more. Share with a friend that you care about, that you trust. What are the things that most scare you about change? What are you most afraid of losing? And what are you most excited about if you feel like you could make change? What are the things that are most scary of committing to something? So change can also mean committing if you don't normally commit to things. One of the things I really believe about commitment is on the other side of 100% commitment to a moment is change, is the ability to have new information come in because you've contained a moment that allows more wisdom to emerge. And in that, that shifts potentially how you feel about something, what action you may want to take. All we can really know is what is true for us in a moment. We have many identities of what we're passionate about, the things that we believe in. But I think it's so important when we can start connecting and allow ourselves to feel something that sometimes may feel completely discombobulating from what you were absolutely certain to be true. And when we can just be with and have enough courage and enough love for ourselves to go, okay, I'm willing to see something novel that's true for me about what I feel. And for years, and I probably still do this, when I would feel that, I'd say, well, I would feel it and I go, but, and I would always have to preface it, but I really da 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 da. And so I would almost like take it away as soon as I would feel a truth that felt different for me. Because somehow I was afraid of being seen differently, judged differently, identified with differently. But you never read the same book twice. Why do I want to be perceived the same way as I have been all my life or even last year? And the person that's most important to be seen by, honestly, is ourselves. I hope that this has inspired you in some way in your personal relationship with change. I have massive compassion for those of you that have either just gone through a loss or an impending loss or having really difficult experiences. Can you sink into the possibility that some of this change may be different than you imagine, that there's something that you are going to discover about yourself that could be so potent that you never would if this change was not happening? I truly have missed these conversations and I look forward to so many more. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Until next time. And now, Trevor Hall with Blue Sky Mind.
Through the body, it's in and through the body, all along, in and through the body, all along, it's in